Hello, welcome back. I'm gonna do something that I honestly don't think I've ever done before in the history of my channel, and that is sit down and film a little book review almost directly after finishing a book and with no notes taken. I just finished reading The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, and this is my first 5-star read of 2026 and a book that I really thoroughly enjoyed. It's a very popular book, so I'm sure you've at least heard of it, but if you don't know what it's about, we're following our main character, Sybil Van Antwerp, who is an avid correspondent. She loves to write letters. It is her preferred method of communication, and she doesn't really like to talk on the phone. She doesn't really like public speaking. She's also very hesitant about email. She much prefers writing letters. And so this book is a collection of correspondence between her and the various people in her life, the various people that she comes to meet, her neighbors, authors of books that she's read and loved, even a customer service representative at a DNA company. It is one of the most charming and like quaint books that I've ever read, but it had a pretty big impact on me while I was reading. Despite the fact that the book is told from only correspondence, we're only getting letters, you get a real sense of who Sybil is as a person, as a friend, as a mother, as a sister. She feels like a real tangible character. She's the kind of person who lives her life a certain way, and she's not going to be swayed by any amount of influence from anyone in her life to be a different kind of person. She is stubborn and a little bit judgmental. She is a little bit presumptuous, and she is nosy, and I love every aspect of her character. Obviously, every chapter in this book is a letter. There's no direct dialogue. There's no like narrative to the story. It is all epistolary. Everything is letters, emails, etc. And I honestly felt like I was reading a book about my own grandmother. My grandmother is one of the sweetest people in the world, but she is stubborn. She's set in her ways. She loves correspondence as well. I have a stack of cards and letters from my grandmother that she's written me over the years. She will write me a thank you note just for spending an afternoon with her. She loves to put stuff in the mail. And some of the things that Sybil got up to throughout the story really also reminded me of things that my grandmother would do, like forming this strange connection with this customer service representative at the DNA company that she's using to submit her DNA and find DNA matches. It was exactly something I could see my grandmother doing too, like just kind of being presumptuous and asking all of these questions and making assumptions. And it was so funny, but it was also really heartwarming and frustrating at times. Sybil is not always the best communicator with her family, with her friends, and so even though it is epistolary and you're getting everything through letters, you really come to understand what kind of person Sybil is, and you really come to understand what her family and friends and neighbors probably think of her, because she is such a fully realized character. I spent a lot of the book imagining the conversations that were happening that weren't in the book. You know, obviously she's not only communicating through letters. She references phone calls and visits and all of those things in the story. So of course I'm imagining the conversations that she's having with these people in person. I'm also imagining the conversations that these people are having with each other separate from her about her antics. It's just one of those stories that isn't much. You know, it is a very simple story about a woman who on the surface seems like a very simple woman, but is a complex and nuanced character, and yet the book packs a huge punch. Sybil is a career attorney. She's been retired for quite a number of decades, but there are some periods of her career that kind of haunt her, both physically and emotionally throughout the story. She's also a mother who has lost one of her children. That is a big plot point of the story, is her loss of her child when he was very young. And so just coming to understand why Sybil is the way she is, I think, is sort of the beauty of a story like this. Sybil is an avid reader, and so is her best friend, who she regularly corresponds with, and they trade book recommendations throughout their letters, which I really love. I love a book that references other books and talks about the themes of those books and why those books might or might not have an impact on someone. She also writes letters to authors of books that she feels very strongly about, and sometimes those authors write letters back to her, and so it's a really interesting look into the mindset of not only our main character, but also the people that she's corresponding with, some of whom are obviously real people. I love an epistolary novel, and I think that this kind of story could only be told in this format. It's just one of those stories that I feel like I had a specific kind of connection with it that I feel there was no other choice but for me to give it 5 stars. I will also say that if you haven't read this book yet and you're looking at reading it, I would highly encourage you to check out the audiobook. It's a full cast narration, which really just adds to the experience. There is so much life that I feel like is brought to the story just from the audiobook experience. I'm glad that I finally got a 5-star read in 2026, despite the fact that it is already almost the end of February. It's a book that's gonna stick with me. It's a book that I'm gonna think about pretty fondly over the course of the year, and I'm gonna gift it to my grandmother for her birthday, which is coming up in just a couple months, because I really feel like she would love this book as well. And I hope when I tell her that I saw a lot of her in the protagonist that she won't retroactively be offended after she reads the book. Before I close out this video, I thought I would just really briefly mention some of the books that Sybil and her friend mention in their letters. Some of these books are books that I've read and would also really recommend. Some of them are on my TBR. There's many others that were mentioned that I don't physically own, but I just wanted to highlight a couple that she specifically wrote letters to these authors or referenced these books multiple times, starting with 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hamp. I can't imagine that this is not at least a bit of an inspiration for the book, because this is also an epistolary format. This is nonfiction about a woman who is writing letters to a bookshop owner. I think it starts during the Second World War maybe, but goes through many, many years. Really, really love this. It's one of my absolute favorites. Probably what got me really into epistolary novels. Wuthering Heights is mentioned, which is kind of exciting considering the new movie. I haven't seen, I'm not planning on seeing it, but she talks about auditing a literature course and they're reading Wuthering Heights, so I'm gonna throw that in there. Never Let Me Go is one that is referenced a couple of times, and I believe she writes to Kazuo Ishiguro as well, which was a fun letter to see her take on the book. Gave me some insight on that book that I hadn't thought about in a while. And then 2 books on my TBR. Bel Canto by Ann Patchett. She references several Ann Patchett novels, but Bel Canto is the one that I own that I haven't read that's mentioned. And then also Larry McMurtry's Lonesome Dove, which is really high on my TBR. I've been thinking about Lonesome Dove a lot because my husband really wants to watch the miniseries with me, and I told him that I wouldn't watch it until I'd read the book. And yeah, I haven't done that yet. She also has an ongoing correspondence with Joan Didion revolving around her book, The Year of Magical Thinking. I thought that their interactions throughout the book were also really sweet because they talked a lot about losing spouses and losing children. I really liked this book a lot, and I would really recommend reading it. If you haven't picked it up and it sounds at all like something you might like, then I would really encourage you to check it out. My first 5-star read of 2026. Thank you so much for watching this very impromptu, probably a little bit chaotic book review. Hopefully I can edit it into some semblance of not nonsense. If you've read The Correspondent and you have similar opinions to me, I'd really love to know. Also, maybe if you have different opinions to me, like why did you not like the book? I'd really love to know that as well. And if you have any recommendations for books that are sort of similar to The Correspondent, please leave those down in the comments as well. I love this type of story and I'm always seeking out more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.